A 10-year-old deaf boy stood outside the concert fence, his hands pressed to a trembling bass speaker. And Keanu Reeves stopped mid-performance the moment he saw him. What he did next stunned the entire crowd, left the boy in tears, and sparked a moment the world still can't explain. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The evening air carried a faint chill, the kind that settles gently over California coastlines when the sun begins to slip behind the hills. It was late 2023, a season when people seemed hungry for nostalgia, hungry for warmth, hungry for something that reminded them life still had small miracles tucked in unexpected places. Dogstar's reunion tour had become one of those surprises. Fans of every age wandered toward the outdoor venue, families holding hands, older couples sharing blankets, teenagers filming the moment on their phones, as if capturing proof that something honest was still happening in the world. Inside the fenced perimeter, lights rose from the stage, creating a glow that spread across the open field. Soft chatter flowed through the crowd, blending with the tuning of instruments. People swayed gently even before the first song began, as if pulled forward by a sound they already trusted. Keanu Reeves stood on stage with his bass slung comfortably over his shoulder, wearing his familiar black jeans and a faded gray shirt that looked like it had lived through a decade of stories. His expression was calm, almost meditative, the kind of quiet joy that came from reconnecting with a forgotten part of himself. But outside the fence beyond the ticketed area stood a small figure no one noticed at first. A boy no older than 10, with dark hair falling slightly over his forehead, pressed both hands against the cold metal links of the fence. His eyes stayed locked on the stage lights. He was close enough to see movement, close enough to feel the energy of everyone gathered, but not close enough to hear the music. He couldn't hear it anyway. The world for him had been silent for years, but he could watch. He could observe the rhythm in people's shoulders, the way heads nodded without thinking, the way hands clapped in patterns he could almost decipher like a code. He focused on the fans nearest to him, mesmerized by the gentle waves of movement rippling through the crowd. For him, it was like watching a language he wished he spoke. A low vibration suddenly rolled across the ground as the band launched into their opening song and the boy stepped closer. Something inside him recognized that vibration. He looked to his right and saw a massive bass subwoofer positioned just beyond the fence line, angled outward for the outdoor setup. Without hesitation, he reached out. One small hand touched the casing. His fingertips quivered. The sensation traveled slowly through his hand, up his wrist, and into his chest. His shoulders softened. His breath deepened. It was the closest thing to hearing he had ever known. Each pulse of the bass felt like a heartbeat that wasn't his. It was music made physical music he could feel without needing ears music that didn't exclude him. Security guards nearby exchanged awkward glances. One of them took a step forward, unsure whether he was supposed to move the child away. But something about the way the boy stood there, gentle, respectful, quietly overwhelmed, made them hesitate. They looked at him the way people look at a small bird, perched on a branch too delicate to disturb. Then the moment shifted. From the stage, Keanu's eyes swept across the audience, searching for something he couldn't name. His gaze drifted toward the side of the venue, and there, through the bright haze of lights and shadows, he saw the boy. Their eyes met in a still electric moment that felt bigger than the music echoing around them. The moment Keanu's eyes found the boy, something inside him paused. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition, as if he understood instantly what the child was experiencing. The boy's fingertips were still pressed gently against the speaker casing, absorbing every vibration with a tenderness that made the world around him fade. Keanu watched the small tremble in the boy's hands, the way his shoulders subtly relaxed, the way his expression shifted from curiosity to quiet wonder. Even from a distance, Keanu could sense that the boy wasn't simply touching the speaker. He was listening with his heart. The band played on the rhythm steady and warm, but Keanu's focus locked on the child as if the crowd had disappeared. His grip on the bass tightened slightly, not out of tension, but out of a deeper emotion rising to the surface. He had always said he felt music with his whole body. Tonight, he saw someone who understood that truth more deeply than anyone else in the audience. The lights washed over the field, casting patterns across the fence where the boy stood. The glow made his small silhouette look fragile yet determined. His other hand remained on the metal links, grounding him, anchoring him to the moment. For a child who lived in silence, this was the closest he had ever been to a live performance. Not through notes, not through lyrics, but through the vibration of life itself. Keanu lowered his head slightly, letting the sensation of the music flow through the bass and into his own hands. He played a long, deep note that moved through the stage floor like a slow wave. He watched the boy react to it. The child's fingers trembled more intensely, and he closed his eyes, letting the vibration travel into his bones. Keanu felt a pressure in his chest, a quiet ache that came from seeing someone experience joy in a way most people never noticed. The security guards stepped closer again, unsure whether they should intervene now that the boy was visibly leaning toward the speaker. One guard raised a hand as if to signal the boy backward, but before he could, Keanu shook his head gently from the stage. It was a subtle gesture, almost invisible to the crowd, but the guards saw it clearly. They paused and stepped back. Keanu's message was simple: let him feel the music. A hush seemed to settle beneath the loudness of the performance. Not a literal silence, but a shift in energy, the kind that happens when something meaningful is unfolding. Keanu's expression softened. He tilted his head slightly, studying the child's face. The boy opened his eyes again and looked toward the stage. He couldn't see Keanu clearly through the lights, but he sensed someone watching him, someone acknowledging him. It was then their eyes met for the second time. This time, there was no distance between them emotionally. Keanu's gaze was steady, full of understanding, and a kind of quiet compassion that didn't need words. The boy blinked as if surprised that someone on stage, someone important, someone holding the very instrument he could feel, was looking directly at him. Keanu gave a small nod, a simple gesture, gentle and reassuring. But to the boy, it felt like the entire stage had bowed toward him. It felt like an invitation. It felt like he belonged there, on the edge of music he could only feel. The moment stretched. The crowd continued to dance. The band continued to play. But between Keanu and the child, the world had narrowed to a single thread of connection, vibrating softly like the strings of the bass. Keanu held that eye contact for a long, steady moment, long enough for the boy to sense that something important had shifted. The child's hands remained on the speaker box, but his attention was now fixed on the musician, who seemed to understand him without saying a single word. The lights flashed across the stage, creating bursts of color that reflected softly in the boy's eyes. The vibrations continued to pulse beneath his palms, but now the moment felt different, warmer, personal. Keanu's fingers moved across the strings again, slower this time, almost like he was testing how deeply the child could feel each note. And every time the bass hummed through the air, the boy responded. His posture straightened, his breathing deepened, a faint smile formed at the corner of his mouth. Keanu saw it, and his expression softened even more, as if acknowledging that smile was the most important part of the entire performance. The audience remained unaware of the exchange unfolding off to the side. They were cheering, swaying, raising their phones, focused entirely on the music. But for Keanu, the show had narrowed to a single point on the edge of the venue. A boy outside the fence, who wasn't supposed to be part of the concert, had become the quiet center of his attention. The boy lifted one hand from the metal fence and pressed it more firmly on the speaker, eager to feel the next note. Keanu responded with a deeper vibration, letting it roll slowly through the field. The boy's eyes widened as if discovering a secret meant only for him. And in that intimate moment, Keanu realized this was no ordinary fan, no ordinary night. Something was calling him toward the boy, something he could not ignore. Dogstar's reunion had started as a quiet whisper among longtime fans, a surprising return no one expected. But by the time fall settled across California, the whisper had grown into a soft wave of excitement that brought people from every corner of the state to see the band they once listened to during late-night drives and lazy Sunday afternoons. The atmosphere around the outdoor venue felt less like a concert and more like a homecoming. People greeted each other with nostalgic smiles, sharing memories of old albums, favorite tracks, and stories of how those songs had carried them through chapters of their lives. Warm string lights stretched across the open field, giving the night a gentle golden glow. Families brought picnic blankets, teenagers climbed onto their parents' shoulders, and couples swayed in the grass before the music even began. The place felt safe, soft, inviting. The kind of environment where strangers accidentally brushed arms and apologized with a smile instead of irritation. Everyone seemed united by a simple desire to feel something honest again. On stage, Keanu Reeves tuned his bass with a calm focus that drew attention even before the show started. He wasn't trying to be the center of anything. He never did. He stood slightly off to the side, adjusting the strap with a small smile, nodding to crew members, exchanging a few quiet laughs with his bandmates. For many fans, this was the version of Keanu they cherished most. Not the Hollywood star, not the action hero, but the musician who looked the most himself when he was lost in rhythm. People pointed towards the stage, whispering to each other with warmth. There was something different about tonight. Keanu looked peaceful, grounded, almost lighter than he had in years, and when the first chord vibrated through the field, the audience moved as one, their bodies responding to the rhythm the way they did decades ago. Kids bounced happily in the arms of their parents. Older fans wiped at the corners of their eyes without embarrassment. A sense of reunion rippled through the air. From his spot on stage, Keanu soaked it all in. He felt the lights on his shoulders, felt the subtle thump of the drums behind him, felt the familiar hum of his bass vibrating against his chest. But even in the joy of performing, he never stopped noticing the world beyond the stage. He had always been that way, sensitive to loneliness, sensitive to anyone who looked like they were trying to belong. His eyes drifted across the crowd, between chords catching tiny details the way others might catch lyrics in a song. And far beyond the paid seating, he noticed something that tugged at him more deeply than the applause. A boy stood outside the fence, small and alone. He was pressed against the chain links as if trying to step into a world he wasn't allowed to enter. Keanu didn't know his story yet. He didn't know why the boy wasn't inside with the others. But something about the way the child watched the stage made him pause, even as his fingers continued playing. He didn't know it yet, but the boy wasn't alone. His mother was nearby, parking far from the entrance, because she couldn't afford the tickets. She had brought him here for one reason, to let him feel the vibrations, but Keanu saw something no one else did. The boy's mother stood several yards away, her hands clasped together as she watched him lean toward the fence. She looked tired in a way that went deeper than a long day. It was the kind of exhaustion carried by parents who love fiercely but quietly, giving everything they have without expecting anything in return. Her hair was pulled back loosely, strands falling out in places where stress had worn away the neatness. Her sweater was thin, faded, and stretched from years of wear. But despite the fatigue in her face, her eyes stayed fixed on her son with the kind of tenderness that could soften even the hardest of days. She had worked 2 shifts that week. She had counted the cash in her wallet 3 different times before deciding she couldn't afford concert tickets. But her son loved the feeling of vibrations, loved how the world seemed to open when the ground hummed beneath him. She had read online that outdoor concerts sometimes allowed sound to travel far beyond the venue. She knew he wouldn't hear the music the way others did, but maybe, just maybe, he could feel it. That hope carried her here. They parked in a free lot almost half a mile away. Her son had walked eagerly beside her, holding her hand tightly, bouncing with anticipation. When they reached the fence, and he realized he could feel small traces of vibration, even before the band began playing, he smiled in a way she hadn't seen in months. That alone made the long walk worth it. Now she watched him gently touching the speaker casing that extended beyond the fence. She stayed quiet, afraid that if she called out to him, she might interrupt whatever miracle was happening. She had seen how isolated he felt in school. She had watched him come home with shoulders slumped, explaining through gestures and scribbles on paper that other kids didn't understand the way he experienced things. Tonight was the first time she had seen that isolation lift even just a little. Inside the venue, the crowd swayed, danced, and lost themselves in the music. Most were unaware of the mother and son standing alone outside the fence. But from the stage, Keanu noticed everything. He saw the boy. He saw how he pressed his hand against the speaker like it was a doorway into a world he desperately wanted to enter. He saw the mother standing alone, several steps back, watching with a mixture of love and helplessness that tightened something in his chest. Keanu continued playing, but his thoughts drifted. He remembered times in his own life when he felt like an outsider, moments when the world seemed loud in ways he couldn't quiet. He remembered feeling invisible and longing for someone to understand him without needing words. As his fingers moved across the bass strings, he studied the boy's posture, the intensity in his expression, the small tremble in his hands as he absorbed the vibration. Keanu felt an unexpected pull toward the child, a sense that their paths crossing tonight wasn't an accident. Around him, the band was in sync, the lighting crew shifting hues across the stage, the audience cheering with growing energy. Yet, through all of that, Keanu's attention kept drifting back to the fence. The boy's connection to the music was pure, unfiltered, and deeply vulnerable. It reminded Keanu of why he loved playing bass in the first place. The feeling of resonance, the feeling of belonging to something larger than himself, the feeling of expressing emotion without needing words. The boy closed his eyes, letting the vibrations move through his bones. His mother held her breath, watching him experience joy in a way she wished he could feel every day. She didn't expect anything more than this. Just a moment, just a memory he could carry. But the universe had a different plan for them. Keanu shifted his stance, slightly angled his bass in a way that projected more vibration toward the edge of the stage. He watched closely as the boy reacted with a small gasp of delight. That subtle gesture deepened Keanu's resolve. He didn't know the boy's name, he didn't know his story, but he knew what it meant to feel left out of life's moments simply because of circumstances outside your control. And in that instant, one truth settled in Keanu's heart with absolute clarity. He saw something no one else did. The music swelled across the field, but Keanu kept watching the boy at the fence, sensing a silent plea beneath his small, trembling hands. The mother wiped her eyes, unaware that everything was about to change. In that fragile moment, a quiet decision formed inside Keanu's heart. The boy had lived in silence for nearly 6 years. Silence, not by choice, not by birth, but by the sudden arrival of a severe infection that struck when he was only 4 years old. Before that, his mother used to say he hummed to everything. He hummed while stacking blocks, while riding in the car, while falling asleep against her shoulder. He hummed even when he didn't know the words to a song. Then one winter afternoon, he stopped humming. He stopped reacting to her voice. And no matter how loudly she called his name, he didn't turn. Doctors explained what had happened. They described nerve damage and irreversible loss. They spoke gently, but the reality broke his mother's heart in a way she didn't think she could ever recover from. She watched her son grow quieter with each passing month. He learned new forms of communication through gestures, expressions, and the careful movements of his hands. He adapted faster than she did, but she could still see the confusion in his eyes whenever people laughed at things he couldn't hear or nodded their heads to songs he couldn't understand. Music became something mysterious to him, something people described with words he couldn't follow. When kids at school debated their favorite bands, he watched quietly, unable to join. When his teachers played cheerful songs during classroom activities, he sat still, trying to guess why everyone else suddenly moved with so much joy. But even though he couldn't hear the sounds themselves, something inside him still responded. Rhythm, in its purest form, was still accessible. He learned early on that the world vibrated if he paid close enough attention. When buses rumbled past, he pressed his hand to the window. When heavy footsteps echoed in a hallway, he placed his palm on the floorboards. When his mother blended soup in the kitchen, he touched the counter and felt the buzzing travel through his fingertips. He learned to translate vibration into emotion. Calm vibrations meant safety. Fast vibrations made him smile. Deep vibrations made him feel anchored, connected to something larger than himself. His mother noticed. She began turning everyday moments into tiny pockets of joy for him. When laundry machines whirred, she let him sit against them and feel the pulsing spin. When summer thunderstorms passed through their town, she let him stand by the window and feel the rumble of the sky through the glass. It became their quiet bond, built not through words, but through sensation, through the language of touch. Still, she wished she could give him more. She wished he could experience the world the way music lovers described it. She couldn't give him sound, but she could give him vibration. Concerts were too expensive, and loud ones were overwhelming, but outdoor events became their way of sneaking small pieces of magic into his life. They would stand near the back, near fences, near walls, wherever vibrations traveled the strongest. Sometimes he felt a little, sometimes he felt nothing. But every time he hoped for more. Tonight was supposed to be another one of those simple outings, another quiet attempt to let her son feel the world move. She didn't expect perfection. She didn't expect miracles. She just wanted to see him smile again. She never imagined this night would change him forever. As the sun dipped behind the hills that evening, the boy walked beside his mother with eager steps. He didn't know the name of the band performing. He didn't know what their song sounded like. But he knew tonight might give him something rare, something he could feel. The parking lot was crowded, but every vibration that traveled through the pavement made him glance up with anticipation. His mother squeezed his hand gently, understanding every spark of excitement without needing to hear a single word from him. When they reached the outskirts of the venue, the boy felt the faint hum of the crowd before he saw the stage lights. People were laughing, talking, shifting their weight from foot to foot while waiting for the band to begin. The boy watched their movements closely. He sensed the buildup, the way groups leaned forward as if expecting something great. The night air held a quiet anticipation that reached even the silent world he lived in. They found a spot beside the chain-link fence, the closest place they could reach without tickets. His mother smiled apologetically, as if she wished she could give him more, but the boy was already studying the glowing stage with wide eyes. To him, the world beyond that fence looked magical. Lights flickered in soft waves, people moved like the tide, and in the center of it all stood a trio of musicians adjusting their instruments. When the first vibration rolled across the ground, the boy stiffened in surprise. It was a low, steady pulse that fluttered against his shoes. He stepped forward curious. Then he felt a slightly stronger tremor, then another. His mother watched him with a hopeful expression, her breath catching, as she saw his posture straighten in recognition. A moment later it happened. The deep rumble of the opening song traveled from the stage, through the air, into the earth, and up the metal fence. The boy reached out instinctively, placing both hands against the chain links. The vibration spread across his palms like warm electricity. His eyes widened, his chest lifted. He pressed closer, hungry for more. To him, it felt like the fence itself had come alive. But then he noticed something else. A large black speaker casing extended slightly beyond the main concert barrier, positioned strategically to carry the bass across the outdoor venue. He stepped toward it slowly, almost cautiously, as if approaching a sleeping creature. His mother followed behind him, watching with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The boy lifted his hand and rested it on the metal surface. The effect was immediate. A ripple of vibration traveled through his fingers, stronger and clearer than anything he had felt before. It wasn't chaotic or overwhelming. It was steady, deliberate, shaped by someone's intention. It felt like a heartbeat someone was sharing with him. He pressed both hands onto the speaker, flattening his palms, letting the vibration soak into his skin. A soft gasp escaped him, not from sound, but from sensation. His eyes glistened with awe. His mother covered her mouth to hold back tears. She had brought him here hoping he might feel something. She never expected him to find something that felt this powerful. She never expected him to look this alive, this connected, this present. All around them, the world continued moving. People danced, lights flashed, music swelled. But for the boy, everything narrowed to the pulsing rhythm beneath his hands. He didn't know what song was playing. He didn't know the name of the musician creating the bass line that made his fingertips tremble. But he felt the emotion behind every note. He felt the world speaking to him in a language he understood. And that joy caught the attention of someone on stage. The boy kept his hands on the speaker, unable to pull away from the steady flow of vibration. His breath deepened with each pulse, and a soft smile stretched across his face, the kind that carried both wonder and relief. His mother watched him closely, memorizing every small shift in his expression, every moment of joy that surfaced after years of quiet frustration. For a child who lived in silence, these vibrations were more than sensation. They were connection. They were belonging. They were the closest he had ever come to understanding what others meant when they said music could change a person. He leaned in even closer, pressing his cheek gently against the metal casing, letting the vibration move not only through his hands, but across his entire face. His eyes fluttered, his body relaxing in a way that showed just how deeply he trusted the moment. His mother wiped her eyes, whispering a silent thank you to a universe that rarely felt this generous. And then, without warning, the boy's head lifted. Something shifted on stage. Something drew his attention. Through the blur of lights, he noticed someone looking back at him with quiet recognition. Someone who understood what he felt. Keanu had always been the kind of performer who noticed details most people overlooked. Even in the middle of a song with lights flashing across the stage and thousands of eyes watching him, he could sense small expressions in the crowd. He had trained himself to play with focus, but he had also learned to stay aware of the energy around him. It grounded him. It reminded him that music wasn't just performance. It was connection. Tonight, that sensitivity drew his attention toward the boy at the fence again and again. At first, he thought he was imagining it. The crowd was large, the stage lights were bright, and his position made it difficult to see anything clearly. But then he saw the boy's small hands trembling on the surface of the speaker casing. He saw how the child leaned in, not with the eagerness of a fan trying to get closer to a celebrity, but with the reverence of someone discovering a new world. The way the boy touched the speaker was striking. It was careful, almost gentle, as though he believed the vibrations were something alive, something he needed to respect. Keanu understood the gesture immediately. He had once felt the same way about music. Not through fame, not through applause, but through the physical sensation of sound traveling through his bones. He remembered practicing bass alone in his room as a teenager, closing his eyes and letting deep notes settle into his chest. He used to say he felt music with his whole body, not just his ears. For him, the bass wasn't just an instrument. It was an anchor. Each vibration pulled him into a place where the noise of the world softened, where he felt more honest, more grounded. Bass had always been his escape, his meditation, his way of finding calm in chaos. Watching the boy tonight, Keanu saw that same purity, the same instinctual understanding, the same hunger for something deeper than sound. Between chords, he studied the child's face. He noticed the way the boy's eyes widened with each pulse of the bass. He recognized the small smile that formed at the corner of his lips. He saw the way the boy seemed to melt into the moment, his shoulders softening, as though the vibration soothed him. Keanu had seen that expression before, on musicians who loved the craft, on kids discovering rhythm for the first time, on people who didn't need words to understand beauty. He played another deep note, longer this time. The vibration moved slowly across the field. Keanu watched as it traveled through the boy's hands, into his arms, across his small frame. It was subtle, but the child reacted as if someone had whispered a secret directly into his heart. Keanu felt a tug inside him, something protective, something unexpectedly emotional. He wanted the boy to feel safe. He wanted him to feel welcomed. He wanted him to know that this moment wasn't an accident. It was meant for him. On stage, his bandmates noticed the shift. The drummer raised an eyebrow when Keanu turned his head a second time toward the fence. The guitarist followed his line of sight and briefly looked confused, wondering what Keanu was focusing on. But Keanu didn't explain. He didn't need to. His instincts had already decided something his mind hadn't fully formed yet. The boy wasn't just reacting to the music. He was connecting to it. He was living it in a way that made Keanu's chest tighten. And Keanu knew he couldn't ignore that connection. Keanu continued playing, but his awareness of the boy sharpened with every passing moment. It wasn't distraction, it was instinct. Something in the child's posture reminded him of himself, at a young age searching for something that made sense in a world that often felt overwhelming. He remembered gripping his first bass guitar, not knowing how to read music, not knowing how to express everything building inside him, but feeling an instant connection the moment the strings vibrated against his fingers. It was the first time he felt like he understood a language without needing words. That same silent understanding now existed between him and the boy at the fence. Keanu played another series of notes, soft enough to blend into the rhythm, yet deep enough to send a gentle wave outward. He watched the boy react instantly. The child pressed both palms more firmly against the speaker, his expression brightening with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. The reaction sent a pulse of warmth through Keanu's chest. He wasn't imagining it. The boy felt the music, truly felt it. His bandmates sensed his shifting focus. The drummer stole another quick glance, trying to understand why Keanu kept angling his body toward the far right of the stage. The guitarist shot him a curious look, between chords silently mouthing a question, but Keanu didn't respond. He kept playing, kept observing, kept letting his instincts guide him. The crowd noticed none of this. They were swaying, shouting, clapping, completely lost in the atmosphere. But Keanu's world had narrowed to a single moment, a single connection unfolding quietly behind the stage lights. He felt something deep inside, something protective and almost urgent. The boy wasn't simply enjoying the vibrations. He was holding on to them like they were a lifeline, something he rarely experienced, something he feared might slip away if he let go. Keanu's breathing slowed as the realization settled. The boy wasn't just drawn to the vibration because it felt interesting. He was drawn to it because it made him feel included. It gave him access to a world that usually moved without him. And Keanu recognized that emotion more than anyone knew. He understood what it felt like to stand on the outside, longing to feel connected to something bigger than himself. When the boy lifted one hand from the speaker and placed it back again with delicate precision, Keanu noticed the slight tremor in his fingers. Not fear, not hesitation. Wonder. Pure, unfiltered wonder. The kind of wonder Keanu hadn't seen in years, the kind that children carried before the world taught them to dull their excitement. A wave of tenderness washed over him. He wanted to give the boy more than a distant experience. He wanted to bring him closer, to let him feel the music the way it was meant to be felt alive and personal. His heart tightened with a sudden certainty. He knew this wasn't a moment to let pass. Something inside him whispered that this child needed more than vibration through a fence. He needed connection through a human hand, through someone who understood him without a single word. Keanu shifted his wide eyes, still locked on the boy, and in that quiet, suspended moment, a decision took shape inside him. A decision that would change the night, a decision that had already begun forming deep within his heart. Keanu played one final lingering note, letting it vibrate through the stage as his eyes remained fixed on the boy. The child didn't blink. He followed every movement of Keanu's hands as if trying to memorize the source of the feeling that brought him so much joy. The lights shifted overhead, washing the stage in soft blue, and the boy's face glowed faintly in the reflection. His palms flattened again on the speaker, absorbing every ounce of vibration, like it was a message meant only for him. Keanu felt something tighten in his throat, a feeling he rarely let surface while performing. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't pity, it was connection. A deep, quiet recognition that reached across the distance between them. He angled his bass slightly, sending another gentle pulse toward the boy, watching the child's eyes widen with gratitude. The moment was too pure to ignore, too honest to leave untouched. His bandmates noticed his stillness, the slight shift in his focus, but they kept playing, trusting him, without question. Keanu inhaled deeply, grounding himself not in the crowd, not in the music, but in the boy who was experiencing the night in the only way he could. What he did next stunned the entire backstage crew. The song eased into its mid-instrumental stretch, a warm and steady flow of rhythm that carried easily through the night air. It was the part of the performance where the crowd usually softened, swaying gently, letting the music settle into their bones. From the outside, it looked like nothing unusual was happening on stage. The guitarist leaned into his melody. The drummer tapped a relaxed pattern. The lights dimmed slightly to create a calmer atmosphere. But Keanu felt something shift inside him. Every note he played reminded him of the boy's trembling hands against the speaker. Every vibration he sent out felt incomplete, unless the child could feel it more directly. The realization had grown too strong to push aside. He knew he had to act now before the moment slipped away. He inhaled slowly, steadying himself. Then, without breaking rhythm, he reached for the bass strap, resting over his shoulder. The movement was gentle, almost unnoticeable at first. Fans near the front row assumed it was part of the performance. Keanu sometimes adjusted his gear during a song, and this looked no different. But instead of tightening the strap, he slid it off completely, letting the weight of the bass settle into his hands. A faint ripple of curiosity moved through the audience. People squinted, wondering why he was shifting positions in the middle of a live set. But Keanu didn't acknowledge the confusion. His focus remained fixed on the boy standing at the fence. He took a small step back from the microphone, eyes never leaving the child. Then he moved toward the right side of the stage, where the closest set of stairs led down to the ground. The guitarist glanced at him with a puzzled expression. The drummer lifted his head briefly, missing a beat for half a second before recovering. Something unusual was happening, but neither of them spoke or signaled him to stop. They knew Keanu well enough to recognize when he was acting from instinct. His instincts were usually quiet, but when they surfaced, they were always driven by sincerity. Keanu reached the edge of the stage and knelt down. The crowd murmured in confusion. Some pointed. Others lifted their phones, unsure whether this was a surprise moment or a mistake. The security guards positioned below the stage tensed, unsure how to respond. Keanu lifted one hand and motioned toward them with a simple, clear gesture. He pointed toward this boy at the fence, then placed his hand over his heart. The message was unmistakable. Security hesitated. They exchanged glances, unsure whether they were allowed to escort a child past the barrier in the middle of a performance. It wasn't standard procedure. It wasn't safe. It wasn't expected. But Keanu met their eyes with the same calm determination he had shown countless times before. He gave them a small, reassuring nod, a nod that said everything was all right, a nod that said he would take responsibility. That tiny gesture changed everything. The guards relaxed. One of them approached the fence, carefully signaling to the boy to stand back for a moment. But the boy didn't move. He was frozen with confusion, unsure if what he was seeing was real. His mother stepped forward quickly, placing a protective hand on his shoulder, ready to pull him back if needed. Keanu extended his arm slightly, inviting the boy closer with a gentle sweep of his hand. The boy blinked, still uncertain, still overwhelmed. The world around them continued moving, but for Keanu and the child, time had narrowed to a single delicate moment. The boy stared at Keanu, unable to process what was happening. He had never been this close to a stage, before never imagined that someone performing under bright lights would stop everything and look directly at him. His hands tightened slightly around the metal fence. The familiar vibration pulsed beneath his palms, but now there was something more. A pull, a question, an invitation. The security guard unlocked a small section of the side barrier. It wasn't large, just enough for equipment to pass through on normal nights. Tonight, it was enough for one small child. The mother looked at Keanu with equal parts fear and disbelief, as if she needed confirmation that this moment was real. Keanu nodded again, his expression warm and steady. He didn't wave or gesture dramatically. He simply held the boy's gaze with a softness that melted all hesitation. The mother knelt down in front of her son and placed both hands on his cheeks. She spoke to him slowly, her lips forming shapes he had learned to read over the years. She told him it was safe. She told him he could go. She told him someone very kind was waiting for him. The boy looked from her face back to Keanu, trying to understand the connection between them. The guard extended his hand. The boy hesitated for a heartbeat, then stepped forward. As he moved away from the fence, the vibrations under his hands faded, and for a brief moment, he felt the familiar emptiness of silence. But Keanu didn't let that moment last. He shifted his bass into his left hand and tapped the side of the instrument once, sending a soft pulse through the air. The boy paused mid-step, sensing it, recognizing it, following it. He approached the open gate slowly, unsure of what waited on the other side. His mother placed her hand over her heart, silently urging him forward. Another small nudge from the guard guided him through the gap. The child stepped inside the venue for the first time in his life. The crowd noticed. People near the stage stopped swaying. Some lowered their phones, others whispered, puzzled but intrigued. They watched as Keanu, still kneeling at the edge of the stage, extended his hand toward the boy, like he was welcoming an old friend. The boy moved closer, his steps cautious but determined. When he reached the base of the stage stairs, Keanu rose slowly to his feet. He stepped down one wooden step, then another, until he was standing eye level with the child. The lights framed him from behind, casting a soft halo that made him appear almost unreal. But his expression was grounded, human, filled with warmth. Keanu offered a gentle smile. A small, sincere smile meant only for the boy. No theatrics, no spotlight, just a moment of human connection in the middle of a concert. The child looked up at him wide-eyed. He lifted one hand as if asking permission to approach. Keanu responded with a simple, open gesture, inviting him forward. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Words weren't necessary between them. The boy stepped closer. Keanu lowered his bass so it hung loosely from his hand, careful not to move too quickly or overwhelm him. When the boy reached him, Keanu placed his free hand on his own chest, a universal sign of reassurance. Then he extended that hand toward the boy. The child hesitated, then placed his small palm in Keanu's. The connection was immediate. The crowd gasped softly. Some people covered their mouths, others gripped the arms of friends beside them. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, gentle, and so unexpectedly tender that it silenced the venue more effectively than any microphone could. Keanu gave the boy's hand a slight squeeze. Then he gestured for the child to follow him along the small path behind the stage speakers, away from the crowded front rows, and into a safer, more controlled space, where vibrations traveled cleanly and strongly. The boy followed, still holding Keanu's hand, his steps small and cautious, but filled with trust. Whispers rippled across the venue. Where is he going? Is that a kid? What's happening? Why did he leave the stage? Phones lifted again. People leaned forward. The band continued playing the instrumental section, but even they were glancing toward the right side of the stage, watching something unfold that none of them had expected. As Keanu guided the child gently behind the stage speakers, the lights dimmed slightly, almost as if the world understood the gravity of this moment. The music softened around the edges. The murmurs quieted. The entire venue felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And in that suspended stillness, the night shifted into something unforgettable. Keanu guided the boy carefully behind the stage speakers, choosing the narrow path that shielded them from the crowded front rows. The air felt different back here, quieter, calmer, yet filled with a deeper kind of vibration that moved through the wooden floorboards like a heartbeat. It was safer, and it was where Keanu knew the music would reach the boy in the purest way. The child followed him with small, hesitant steps, still gripping his hand. His eyes kept darting between Keanu's face and the bass guitar hanging from his shoulder. He didn't know what was happening yet, but something inside him trusted this moment. He could feel it long before he could understand it. Keanu stopped near a sturdy wooden riser placed just behind the main speaker line. It was a spot where low frequencies pooled naturally, vibrating up through the planks in powerful but controlled waves. The lighting was softer here, away from the audience's view, The stage crew nearby paused what they were doing, watching with quiet curiosity, sensing that something meaningful was about to unfold. Keanu knelt down slowly so he could meet the boy's eyes without towering over him. He rested the bass gently across his lap and waited for the child to settle. The boy looked at him with wide, expectant eyes, his chest rising and falling with a soft, unsteady rhythm. Keanu lifted his hand in a reassuring gesture, placing it over his own heart before pointing toward the boy's hands. A silent question, a silent request. The boy understood. He extended his small hands, palms open, fingers trembling slightly. Keanu reached out and took them gently, guiding them toward the wooden body of his bass guitar. The instrument vibrated faintly even during the instrumental loop, its strings buzzing softly from the lingering resonance of the last note he played. Keanu placed the boy's palms directly against the warm curve of the bass. The reaction was immediate. A soft shiver moved up the child's arms. His eyes widened in shock, then wonder, then something deeper, something almost spiritual. He leaned forward instinctively, pressing both hands more firmly against the instrument, as if afraid the feeling might slip away. The vibration traveled through his fingers, up his wrists, across his small arms, and into his chest. It was steady, gentle, alive, nothing like the cold metal of the speaker casing he'd touched before. This was different. This was intimate. This was music being born from a living instrument and flowing directly into him. A warmth blossomed across the boy's face, blooming upward like sunrise light, stretching over a horizon. His lips parted in a silent breath of awe. His knees softened, and he sank slightly closer, letting the vibration wrap around him like a blanket. For the first time in his life, he was feeling music the way it existed in its purest form, through touch, through resonance, through human intention. Keanu watched him closely, overwhelmed by the expression unfolding before him. His chest tightened with emotion, but he kept his movement steady. He lifted his hand to the strings and plucked a slow, deep note. The vibration intensified beneath the boy's palms. The child gasped softly, then smiled so brightly it looked like it illuminated the dim backstage corner. Keanu let himself smile back, a small, gentle smile filled with gratitude for being allowed to witness such a moment. He shifted his fingers and played another note a little higher this time. The vibration changed shape, lighter, fluttering, like a soft breeze. The boy laughed, a silent, breathy laugh that shook his shoulders and lit up his whole face. Keanu's heart swelled. And he wasn't done yet. Keanu shifted the bass slightly so the boy could feel the full depth of each vibration. He angled the instrument just enough so the wooden body rested comfortably within the boy's reach. The child responded immediately, adjusting his hands, as though learning an unspoken choreography. His palms explored the curved surface, tracing the ridges, the smooth grain, the warm pulsation beneath the finish. Every new texture triggered another spark of fascination in his eyes. Keanu played another long, deep note. This one resonated more strongly, moving through the air in a wave so thick it felt nearly visible. The boy inhaled sharply as the vibration rolled across his hands and into his arms. He leaned in closer, pressing his chest forward, trying to capture as much of the sensation as possible. The air hummed with the soundless connection, forming between them a bridge built entirely from vibration, intention, and the purest form of communication. The boy's shoulders relaxed completely as he settled into the feeling. The tension he carried from navigating a world built for hearing people seemed to melt away. Instead came awe, confidence, presence. Keanu recognized that transformation with a quiet intensity. He had felt something similar the first time he played bass as a teenager, discovering for himself that vibrations could anchor the chaos swirling inside him. Watching the boy now, he felt as if he were witnessing a version of his own story unfold in front of him. He plucked another note softer this time, almost feather-light. The vibration was gentle, delicate enough to make the boy giggle. His laughter was silent, but his joy was unmistakable. He leaned back slightly, then forward again, as if trying to chase the feeling. Keanu's smile widened. He played a short riff, each note shifting in strength and shape. The boy moved with it instinctively, adjusting his fingers as if he could follow the melody through vibration alone. Stage crew members stood a few feet away, frozen in place. They watched with expressions ranging from disbelief to quiet emotion. They had seen Keanu interact with fans before, always humble and kind, but never like this. Never in the middle of a performance. Never with such gentle focus. They knew something important was happening, but none of them dared interrupt the moment. The boy placed his ear gently against the body of the bass, even though it wouldn't give him sound. It gave him vibration, and that was enough. His eyes fluttered shut as the instrument pulsed softly beneath his cheek. Keanu's breath caught at the sight. He steadied the bass with a firm but tender grip, making sure it didn't shift or startle the boy. Then he played a slow sequence of notes, letting them resonate one after another. The vibrations traveled through the wood in waves. The boy's fingers curled around the edges of the body, clinging to the sensation as if anchoring himself to the moment. His cheeks flushed, his lips parted, and another silent laugh trembled through him. For a child who had spent years experiencing the world through limited senses, this was magic. This was revelation. This was belonging. Keanu felt heat rise behind his eyes. He blinked it back gently. This moment wasn't about him. It was about the boy discovering something he had been denied through no fault of his own. He played another gentle riff, and the boy shone brighter than any stage light in the venue. Keanu shifted his fingers lightly across the strings, creating a soft ripple of vibration that traveled through the wooden body of the bass and straight into the boy's palms. The child's reaction was immediate. His eyes widened again, but this time the emotion behind them felt deeper, almost overwhelming. He pressed both hands more firmly into the instrument, as if trying to hold the vibration inside himself for as long as possible. His shoulders rose with a small breath, then relaxed into a peaceful stillness that made Keanu's heart tighten. For a brief moment, the rest of the world faded. There were no crowds, no lights, no loud music swirling overhead, only the quiet connection between a musician who understood the language of vibration and a child who had been waiting his whole life for someone to speak it with him. Keanu played one more gentle phrase, letting each note linger just long enough to create a soft wave of resonance. The boy leaned in, absorbing every pulse, every tremble, every moment. He laughed again, his face bright with unfiltered joy. Keanu's smile deepened, filled with gratitude for being able to give him this experience. But the world wasn't done with this moment. Not even close. At first, only a few people near the front realized something unusual was happening. They had been watching the stage swaying to the music when they noticed that Keanu was no longer standing in his usual spot. The guitarist was carrying the melody alone now, and the drummer was stretching the rhythm with steady improvisation. It took a moment for the crowd to understand that Keanu had stepped away from the center of the performance. A couple of fans leaned forward, squinting toward the far right corner of the stage where the lights didn't shine as brightly. They saw the outline of two figures in the shadowed area behind the speakers. One tall, one small. The tall one held a bass. The small one held a wonder-struck stillness. People in the front row exchanged glances, unsure how to react. It didn't look like part of the show. It looked personal. Phones began to rise one by one. At first timidly, then with growing curiosity. People lifted their cameras above their heads, trying to zoom in on whatever was unfolding backstage. A few whispered to each other, their voices soft but filled with questions. Some murmured, pointing toward the corner where Keanu knelt beside the child. Others simply stared, sensing something meaningful was happening, even if they didn't yet understand what it was. The band continued playing, doing their best to keep the music flowing. The guitarist picked up small rhythmic patterns that filled the space Keanu's bass usually held. The drummer glanced down toward the backstage corner. Between beats, his expression puzzled but steady. He trusted Keanu. He knew that whatever was happening, it had a purpose. So he kept the rhythm alive, shaping it slowly, giving the moment room to breathe. The whispers spread outward like ripples on water. People turned to one another asking the same questions with hushed urgency. Why was Keanu off stage? Who was the child? Was this planned? Was something wrong? But no one sounded alarmed. They sounded curious, softened, drawn in by the gentle strangeness of it all. Then a camera operator near the left wing of the stage finally caught sight of the scene. He froze for a moment, trying to decide whether it was appropriate to film. But the boy's expression, radiant, overwhelmed with joy, made the decision for him. This wasn't a private struggle. This wasn't a moment of distress. It was a moment of connection, unlike anything he had ever seen during a concert. He turned his lens, framed the shot carefully, and signaled another crew member to route the feed to the large side screens towering above the stage. A beat later, the screens flickered. Then the entire venue saw it. The massive display lit up with the image of Keanu kneeling beside the boy, guiding the child's small hands along the wooden body of the bass. They saw the boy's eyes glowing with joy. They saw his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. They saw Keanu's gentle expression as he played one soft note after another, watching the boy feel the music through his fingertips. The crowd went silent. Not a single cheer, not a single shout, just stillness. It was as if the entire audience, thousands of people, held their breath at the same time. The moment didn't ask for noise. It asked for feeling. It asked for quiet. It asked for awe. And awe filled the venue like sound never could. The silence that spread across the venue felt heavier than sound. It was the kind of silence that didn't come from the absence of noise, but from the presence of something sacred. Thousands of people stood shoulder to shoulder, yet every person seemed suspended in their own private moment of wonder as they watched the scene unfold on the massive screens above the stage. The image didn't look staged. It didn't look rehearsed. It looked human. On the screen, Keanu played a soft, pulsing rhythm, each note carefully chosen, each vibration sending a warm tremor into the wooden floor beneath them and straight into the boy's hands. The child's laughter, silent to his own ears, radiated through his entire body. His smile seemed brighter than the stage lights themselves. His fingers clung to the bass as if it were a living creature sharing a secret with him, revealing something beautiful he had never been able to access before. People in the audience felt their throats tighten. Strangers placed hands over their hearts. Some wiped their eyes without embarrassment. It was rare to witness such pure connection, especially in a world constantly rushing forward. But tonight, everything slowed, everything softened. Everyone saw the same thing, a musician sharing not a performance, but a gift. In the middle rows, a teenager nudged her friend and whispered, "He's not doing that for the cameras." Her voice trembled slightly. "He's doing that just for the kid." Near the back, an older man who had come only because his daughter dragged him along found himself standing perfectly still, his usual impatience dissolving. He stared at the screen with a look that acknowledged something he didn't know he needed to see. Something genuine, something tender. Parents in the crowd tightened their arms around their children. Some whispered explanations. Others said nothing, letting the moment speak for itself. Even the youngest kids, normally restless, giggling, tugging on sleeves, were quiet now, sensing something sacred, even if they didn't fully understand it. On stage, the guitarist and drummer continued their improvisation with quiet respect. They didn't try to reclaim attention or shift the spotlight. They held the rhythm steady, creating a soft musical cushion beneath the moment, supporting Keanu without overshadowing what was happening behind the speakers. Both musicians kept glancing toward the screens, their eyes soft with disbelief and admiration. Backstage crew members who had been rushing to adjust equipment now stood frozen at their stations, watching the feed from the side monitors. Some whispered to each other about how gentle Keanu was being. Others simply stood in silence, their expressions softening with each passing second. None of them had seen him pause a performance like this before, not even in the most emotional moments of previous tours. This was different. This was private, yet somehow meant for everyone. Keanu guided the boy's hands again, showing him how to move his palms slowly along the body of the bass. how to feel the difference between a deep vibration and a light one, how each note changed shape through resonance. The boy followed every motion with total trust. He didn't look at the screen. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't even look at his own mother, who stood just beyond the speakers, tears pooling in her eyes. He looked only at Keanu, his guide into a world he had never been able to enter before tonight. No one cheered. They didn't need to. They felt it instead. The moment belonged to everyone, yet belonged entirely to the boy. The boy's laughter echoed across the screens in silent brightness, and the crowd seemed to lean into the moment, as if afraid to disturb it. Keanu shifted his bass gently, making sure the vibrations stayed strong and steady under the boy's hands. The child pressed his palms deeper into the wood, his face glowing with delight, his body trembling with a joy so pure it felt almost sacred. Every movement of his fingers showed discovery. Every breath showed gratitude. Keanu lifted his eyes briefly toward the audience and saw the stillness. Thousands of people held in a quiet reverence. He hadn't expected their faces soft, their hearts open. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a shared human moment carried by emotion rather than sound. Keanu returned his focus to the child and plucked a final soft note. The boy gasped, then laughed again, a bright expression that seemed to light up the entire backstage corner. His mother covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with emotion, overwhelmed that her son was experiencing something she once believed he never could. And as Keanu played one last gentle riff, the connection between them deepened. And when the song ended, the world exploded. The final note faded into the night air like a soft breath, and the improvised rhythm from the guitarist and drummer slowly came to a gentle stop. It was as if the entire band wanted to honor the fragile stillness created between Keanu and the boy. For a heartbeat, the venue remained silent, suspended in a moment no one wanted to break. Then the crowd released a collective exhale, a wave of emotion rolling across the field as phones lowered and people wiped at their eyes. Keanu remained kneeling for a few seconds longer, letting the boy savor the last tremble of vibration beneath his fingertips. The child kept both hands firmly on the bass until the final pulse faded. Only then did he lift his head, eyes glowing with a joy so bright that Keanu felt something deepen in his chest. He reached out and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, a silent thank you for sharing the moment with him. The boy responded by stepping closer and wrapping his arms tightly around Keanu's waist. The hug was sudden and earnest, a gesture filled with the kind of gratitude only a child could express so openly. Keanu froze for a moment, overcome by the simplicity of it. Then he wrapped one arm around the boy's back and held him carefully, mindful of how delicate the moment was. The boy pressed his face against Keanu's shirt, absorbing the vibrations still lingering in the fabric from the bass. The audience watched in silence, their hearts softening even further. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others placed hands over their hearts. A few whispered things like, "He needed that, and that's the kindest thing I've ever seen." But none of their voices reached the boy's world, and none of them disrupted the tender quiet that wrapped around the two figures near the speakers. Keanu loosened his hold slightly and gave the boy a small nod, motioning gently toward the side path where he had guided him earlier. He wanted to return him safely to the fence, back to his mother, back to the person who had brought him here with hope rather than expectation. The boy nodded eagerly, keeping close to Keanu's side as they walked. The stage crew stepped back to give them space. The guitarist lowered his instrument respectfully. The drummer set his sticks down quietly, watching with softened eyes. Even the lighting crew dimmed the brightness near the speakers, allowing the moment to stay warm, intimate, undisturbed. As Keanu led the boy around the corner, the child's mother rushed forward, her steps unsteady, her hands trembling. Tears streaked down her face. She had watched everything from only a few feet away, but the emotional weight of the moment made her feel as if the world had stopped spinning. She reached her son and dropped to her knees, pulling him into her arms. He hugged her tightly, his face glowing with excitement, as he tried to show her through gestures and unspoken emotion what he had just experienced. She lifted her eyes to Keanu, overwhelmed, Apologies spilled from her lips. Thank yous tumbled out in frantic, breathless waves. Her hands covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. She didn't know how to contain the gratitude flooding through her. It was too much, too big, too unexpected. Keanu raised a calm hand, signaling gently that she didn't need to apologize. He shook his head slowly, offering her the same quiet reassurance he had given her son. His expression held nothing but warmth. And then with soft hands, he signed a simple phrase he had learned long ago. Thank you. Her breath stopped. She hadn't expected him to know even that. The mother stared at Keanu, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, she couldn't move. The simple gesture he made felt larger than the night itself. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't politeness. It was understanding. She felt her breath catch in her chest, as if the air around her had shifted. Her son pulled at her sleeve, eager to show her with rapid movements of his hands how the vibrations felt against the base. She nodded through her tears, running her fingers gently through his hair, silently thanking the universe for giving him something he had long been denied. Keanu watched the two of them with quiet tenderness. He rested the base against his leg, allowing the instrument to fall still for the first time since he had played for the boy. The child looked at him again with glowing eyes, and Keanu responded by placing his hand over his heart once more. The boy mirrored the gesture shyly, pressing his small palm to his chest. Keanu smiled a soft and honest expression that deepened the warmth between them. The surrounding security guards relaxed out of their tense postures, realizing there was no need for intervention. Stagehands stood frozen in the wings, still processing what they had witnessed. And out in the venue, the crowd looked on with a reverence usually reserved for sacred moments in life. Nobody rushed, nobody shouted, nobody pushed forward. Everyone simply watched, knowing instinctively that something beautiful had unfolded right in front of them. The mother finally wiped her cheeks and stood up, steadying herself with a trembling breath. She reached out and touched Keanu's forearm lightly, as if afraid that too much pressure might disrupt the significance of the moment. He met her gaze and shook his head gently, letting her know she didn't need to thank him with words. The emotion in her eyes was more than enough. Her son tugged at her hand, then reached toward Keanu as if asking for just one more moment beside him. Keanu nodded slowly and knelt down to the boy's level. He held out the base again, allowing the child to place one hand on the wooden body. Without playing a full note, Keanu tapped the strings softly, sending a faint, lingering vibration into the boy's palm. The child closed his eyes, savoring it with a peaceful smile. It was a small gift, a final vibration, a quiet echo of everything he had felt tonight. But the night had one more gift to give. When the concert finally came to an end and the crowd began filing out of the venue, Keanu didn't disappear backstage the way performers usually did. Instead, he walked slowly beside the boy and his mother, guiding them through a side entrance that bypassed the noisy exits and led into a calm, softly lit backstage corridor. The boy stayed close, still buzzing inside from the vibrations he had felt, his hands brushing occasionally against Keanu's base, as if afraid the sensation might fade if he stopped touching it. Stagehands stepped aside respectfully as the trio passed. Some nodded, some smiled. Many simply watched with quiet admiration. There was something undeniably special about the small group moving through the hallway. Keanu led them to a modest lounge room tucked behind the main stage. It wasn't fancy, just a long couch, a few chairs, water bottles on a table, but the space felt safe, warm, and quiet. Somewhere the moment could breathe. The mother hesitated at the doorway, unsure if she belonged there, but Keanu motioned her gently forward. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, pulling her son in front of her. The boy immediately gravitated toward the base in Keanu's hand, his eyes bright with curiosity. Keanu lowered himself to one knee, again bringing the base down with him, so the child could rest his fingers against the silent instrument. The boy pressed his palm against the wooden body and waited, expecting vibration, expecting something to move him. But the base was unplugged now, resting quietly in Keanu's lap. There was no sound, no resonance, only stillness. The boy tilted his head slightly in confusion. Keanu smiled softly and placed his own hand over the boy's, showing him that even without vibration, the music they shared still mattered. The mother watched them for a long moment before her emotions finally overcame her. She sank onto the edge of the couch, pulling a tissue from her pocket with trembling fingers. She tried to steady her breath, but tears came anyway. She brushed them away quickly, embarrassed, but Keanu shook his head slightly, letting her know there was nothing to apologize for. "It's just," she whispered, struggling to find her words. "You don't know how much this means to him." Keanu sat beside the boy, keeping his posture open and patient. He didn't rush her. He didn't look away. His eyes stayed calm, steady, and attentive, giving her the space she needed to speak. She took a long breath, then began. "My son, he's wonderful. He's bright. He's gentle. But he's been alone for so long." Her voice cracked as she said it, and she covered her mouth briefly before continuing. "Kids at school don't understand him. They don't know how to include someone who can't hear them. He tries to communicate, but they get impatient or confused, and he ends up sitting alone." The boy looked up at her, unsure what she was saying, but sensing her sadness. She brushed a hand across his hair and kissed the top of his head, then continued. "He rarely laughs like he did tonight. I can't remember the last time I saw him smile so big." She lowered her head and wiped her tears again. Then she whispered the sentence she had been carrying inside her for years. "My son has never laughed so hard in his life." Keanu listened to every word with a stillness that made the room feel smaller, safer, as if nothing outside mattered except this conversation. He kept one hand lightly on the base, the other resting gently on the floor beside him. His presence alone seemed to steady the mother, allowing her to speak through her tears without feeling judged or pitied. She drew a shaky breath and continued. "He wasn't always this isolated. Before he got sick, he was social. He loved people. He loved music especially. He used to hum to everything, even commercials. And when he stopped hearing, I thought maybe he'd still find a way to enjoy it somehow." Her voice tightened, but the world became so quiet for him, too quiet. The boy wasn't listening to her words, but he sensed the heaviness in her tone. He reached for her hand, placing his small palm against her arm. It was a gesture he often used when he wanted to reassure her. Tonight it felt different. It carried both comfort and the lingering joy of the moment he'd just lived. The mother smiled at him through her tears, brushing her thumb along his cheek. "I've tried everything to help him feel included. I take him to places where the ground vibrates, where he can touch walls or windows and feel even a little bit of what others hear. But nothing has ever made him react the way he reacted with you." She looked at Keanu again, her voice softening. "I've never seen him light up like that, not since he lost his hearing." Keanu lowered himself onto both knees again so he could sit level with the child. He gently lifted the base and tilted it forward. The boy placed his hand on it without hesitation, even though it remained unplugged and still. The connection now wasn't about vibration. It was about the memory of what he felt moments ago. A memory so powerful, it seemed to hum inside him even without sound. Keanu watched the boy trace the curved edge of the instrument with careful fingers. He had seen many fans admire his bass before, but never with such reverence, never with such innocence. The boy wasn't admiring a celebrity. He was touching a miracle, one he had never thought he would experience. The mother whispered, "Thank you for treating him like he matters. People look at him and only see what he can't do. Tonight, you saw what he feels." Keanu's expression softened even further. He placed his hand lightly over the boy's again, adding warmth to the silent moment. Then he looked up at her eyes, steady and filled with compassion. A decision had already begun forming inside him, a decision that would change everything. The decision formed quietly inside Keanu, the way all of his most meaningful choices did. There was no dramatic pause, no moment of hesitation. It was simply clear. He rose slowly from where he knelt beside the boy and set the bass gently across his lap one final time before standing. The child looked up at him with confusion, unsure why the vibration had stopped or where Keanu was going. Keanu placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, offering a small, reassuring nod. Then he stepped toward the door of the lounge room, excusing himself with a soft gesture. The mother watched him leave, wiping her eyes, unsure whether he needed space or whether the moment was simply ending. She whispered to herself that she didn't want to take any more of his time. She had already received more kindness than she ever expected from a stranger, let alone someone recognized around the world. Keanu walked down the narrow hallway, passing stagehands who paused to greet him quietly. Most didn't speak. They sensed he was deep in thought. His footsteps were slow and deliberate. He headed toward a small storage room where he kept his gear during the tour. When he reached the door, he took a deep breath before pushing it open. Inside, several instrument cases were lined neatly against the wall. He walked straight to the black case he had carried for years, scuffed at the edges, marked by stickers from old tours, and worn from countless rehearsals. Inside lay the bass he had played tonight. It wasn't just any bass. It was a limited edition piece he had owned since the early days of Dogstar's revival. It held memories in its wood, years of practice, sweat, and sound. It had traveled across cities, lights, crowds, and silent moments. It wasn't expensive because of craftsmanship. It was priceless because of meaning. Keanu opened the case slowly. The familiar shine of the polished body reflected the dim backstage light. He ran his fingers gently across the strings, feeling the slight warmth left from the performance. This was the instrument that had delivered the vibrations the boy had felt so deeply. This was the instrument that brought the child's laughter. This was the instrument that created the moment he never wanted the boy to forget. He lifted it out of the case with both hands holding it the way one holds something sacred. For the briefest moment, he remembered the first time he had ever touched it, how he had felt the resonance move through him like a second heartbeat. Now it would become that heartbeat for someone else. He carried it carefully back down the hallway. When he stepped into the lounge room again, the mother looked up in surprise. She hadn't expected him to return with anything, much less the bass he had just used on stage. Her son noticed it instantly. His eyes widened, his body leaning forward instinctively, as if drawn toward the instrument by memory alone. Keanu approached them slowly, his steps quiet and thoughtful. He held the bass upright for a moment, letting the child see it clearly, letting him understand that this wasn't a casual gesture. It was something more. Then Keanu knelt again, lowering the bass into the boy's line of reach. The child froze. The mother gasped. The boy stared at the bass as if it were glowing. His small hands hovered in the air, trembling with anticipation, but unsure if he was allowed to touch it. Keanu saw the hesitation and offered a gentle nod, lowering the neck of the instrument so it rested comfortably across his hands. The boy reached forward slowly, almost reverently, and placed his fingertips on the strings. The familiar sensation wasn't there. This time, no vibration, no deep hum, but the memory of what he had felt earlier flickered through his eyes like soft light. The mother pressed a hand to her chest. She whispered a quiet breath that trembled with disbelief. She didn't understand yet. She didn't dare assume, but she sensed something extraordinary was unfolding right in front of her. Keanu adjusted his position slightly, lifting the bass so the boy could explore it freely. The child moved his fingers along the frets, feeling the cool metal, the smooth wood, the softness of the polished surface. His expression filled with awe, the same wonder he had shown earlier, but now deepened by the understanding that this instrument was meant for him to touch. Keanu waited until the boy lifted his eyes. Only then did he place his hand gently over the boy's small fingers. With his free hand, he signed 2 simple words, words he had learned long ago from a friend who taught him the basics of American Sign Language. Words he had never expected to use in this moment, but now carried a meaning far beyond their shapes. "This is yours." The mother gasped loudly, then clasped both hands over her mouth as her knees weakened. She stared at the bass, at Keanu, at her son. Tears filled her eyes, instantly overflowing faster than she could wipe them away. She shook her head in disbelief, struggling to understand how a stranger, Someone she had known only through movies and public appearances could give something so valuable to her child without hesitation. The boy didn't fully understand the words, but he felt the meaning. He looked from the bass to Keanu's face, searching for confirmation. Keanu nodded again, slow and steady, his expression soft with sincerity. He pointed to the instrument, then to the boy's chest. A simple gesture, a simple truth. It's yours. The child's breath caught. He hugged the bass with both arms, holding it against his body, as if it were something fragile and alive. His face lit with pure joy, the kind that filled him so completely that his shoulders shook with silent excitement. He pressed his cheek against the wooden body of the instrument and closed his eyes as if trying to relive the vibrations he had felt just minutes ago. Around them, the backstage crew silently watched, stunned. Some exchanged glances, some shook their heads in disbelief, others simply smiled with softened expressions, knowing they were witnessing something rare and unforgettable. And Keanu understood that the true gift wasn't the bass, it was the message behind it. The moment the concert ended and the crowd began drifting out into the cool night air, something unusual happened. Instead of a flood of noisy excitement, people walked in a hush, still overwhelmed by what they had witnessed. Even before they reached their cars, many were already staring down at their screens, replaying the clips they had captured backstage. Dozens of short videos showed the same moment from different angles, Keanu kneeling beside the boy, guiding his hands across the bass, the child laughing silently in pure joy. One fan in the front row uploaded her clip before she even left the venue parking lot. She titled it simply, "This is why the world loves Keanu Reeves." Within minutes, it began to gain traction. Another fan posted her own recording with the caption, "A deaf child felt music tonight. I can't stop crying." A third posted a slow-motion version of the moment when the boy first touched the bass. That one spread even faster. By the time the first groups of fans reached the freeway entrances, the clips had already begun circulating across the country. People watched them in restaurants, on buses, in rideshare cars, heading home. Some recorded reaction videos right there in their back seats, faces lit by phone screens as they wiped tears and tried to explain what they had seen. No one explained it perfectly. No one had to. The emotion spoke for itself in every frame. Within the first hour, the posts reached thousands of likes. Within 3 hours, they reached hundreds of thousands. By midnight, they were everywhere. Bloggers grabbed the story first, writing lines like, "In an age of noise, Keanu shows the world the power of quiet compassion." Music forums reposted the clip with stunned admiration. One musician wrote, "This is the purest form of connection I have ever seen. No fame, no ego. Just love through vibration." Parents of deaf children around the world discovered the video next. Their comments flooded the reposts, each one more emotional than the last. One mother wrote, "My daughter is deaf and loves feeling music through vibrations. Watching this made me sob." Another said, "Keanu gave this boy a gift I've tried for years to give my son. Bless him." Then came the musicians, bassists, guitarists, drummers, singers, and producers. Some shared stories of similar moments from their own careers. Others admitted they had never seen anything like it. A well-known bassist wrote, "Bass is a physical instrument. You feel it before you hear it." Keanu understands this deeply. Before dawn, ASL teachers, interpreters, and deaf community advocates began sharing the clip too. Their messages carried a different kind of love, laced with appreciation for a small but deeply respectful gesture. One influencer wrote, "His signing wasn't perfect, but it was heartfelt. He honored this child's world. That matters more than anything." A prominent deaf educator posted, "Representation is not just about being seen. It's about being understood." Keanu understood. Her post crossed 1 million views by morning. News outlets soon joined in. Headlines appeared across social platforms like a wave spreading across the continent. Keanu Reeves lets a deaf child feel music with his heart. A concert moment becomes a lesson in empathy. A superstar puts down his instrument to lift up a child. People who had never attended a Dogstar concert found themselves moved to tears by a moment they had not witnessed in person. It didn't matter. The emotion was universal, and the world kept watching. By the next afternoon, the clips reached international audiences. People who had never listened to Dogstar clicked play out of curiosity, only to find themselves pulled into the emotional gravity of the moment. Thousands of comments poured in from viewers around the globe who didn't share the same language, culture, or background, yet understood the purity of what they were seeing. It wasn't a celebrity moment, it was a human moment. One woman from Brazil wrote, "I don't know a word of English, but I understood everything." Another viewer from South Korea commented, "This boy's smile is universal." A father from Germany shared, "My son is deaf. We feel music with touch. Thank you for showing the world how beautiful that is." The post garnered thousands of likes within minutes. Clips spread to TikTok, stitched into stories from parents, teachers, musicians, and regular people who simply wanted to share something uplifting. Reaction videos multiplied. Some people cried openly on camera. Others smiled quietly as they watched hand over their heart. A music therapist posted a breakdown explaining why low frequencies travel so powerfully through the body, praising Keanu for instinctively knowing how to guide the child. Her explanation brought scientific clarity, but the emotional core remained untouched. By evening, mainstream news outlets began airing short segments about the interaction. The clips were shown on morning shows, entertainment programs, and late-night broadcasts. Reporters repeated the same sentiment. This wasn't staged. It wasn't planned. It was a moment of kindness that reminds us of what connection can look like. Even journalists known for their critical tone softened their delivery when describing how the boy's face lit up with each vibration. Celebrities took notice as well. Musicians reposted the clip with messages of admiration. One famous rock guitarist wrote, "Most musicians dream of moments like this. Not on stage glory, real connection." A prominent actor added, "I've worked with Keanu. This is exactly who he is when no one is watching." The validation from industry peers added another wave of attention. Then came the ASL community. Interpreters praised Keanu for using sign language even in its simplest form. Deaf creators stitched the video with heartfelt commentary explaining what the moment meant to them. A deaf influencer wrote, "He didn't just give the boy music, he gave him belonging." Her video racked up millions of views in 24 hours. Parents of deaf children filled the comment sections with gratitude, sharing stories of their own kids discovering music through touch. The conversation became more than a viral moment. It became a celebration of the many ways people experience the world. But late that evening, amid the thousands of comments and reactions, one message rose above the rest. A message that would change the meaning of the moment forever. The wave of attention didn't slow, it only grew. By the second day, the video of Keanu and the boy had become one of the most shared clips on every major platform. It traveled from phones to televisions, from local news stations to international broadcasts, from personal pages to global headlines. People around the world kept commenting, sharing, reacting, and crying at the sight of a child discovering music in a way few had ever witnessed. But buried among the millions of reactions, likes, shares, and reposts, a particular comment began gaining traction. It didn't appear from a celebrity or musician. It wasn't written by someone with a huge following or media presence. It came from an ordinary mother posting under a profile with only a handful of pictures, most of them of her daughter, a girl with warm brown eyes and a bright smile. Her words were simple, but they carried a depth that seemed to cut through every other comment. "I wish more people understood that deafness isn't silence. It's another way of experiencing the world." Within minutes, people began liking the comment. Within hours, it had thousands of reactions. By the next morning, it became the top comment under the most watched version of the viral clip. Parents of deaf children responded with gratitude. Teachers and interpreters reposted it. Deaf creators stitched it into their videos, nodding with emotion. Musicians highlighted the truth behind her words. The comment didn't just resonate, it educated. It reframed the moment in a way people hadn't considered. Someone tagged Keanu in a repost of the comment. Then another, then another. He eventually saw it. He had been avoiding most of the noise surrounding the video. He never chased viral attention. He never cared about the spotlight. But this comment stopped him. He read it twice, then a third time. He let the words settle in his chest, letting their truth sink into him. Deafness isn't silence. It isn't emptiness. It isn't a lack. It's a different way of experiencing the world. Keanu sat alone in a small rehearsal room with his bass leaning gently against his knee. He thought about the boy. He thought about the vibrations that had lit up his face, about the way he laughed without sound, about the way his hands trembled with joy when he felt the resonance travel through the instrument. It wasn't silence. It was feeling. It was connection. It was emotion expressed in another language. The comment touched him more deeply than he expected. It put words to something he had witnessed but hadn't been able to articulate. He leaned forward, opened the post where the original clip had been shared, and tapped the reply button beneath the mother's comment. He didn't write a long response. He didn't craft a speech. He didn't try to sound wise or poetic. He wrote from the same quiet instinct that guided him on stage that night. Music is not just sound, it's vibration, emotion, and connection. He clicked send. Within minutes, his response exploded. People screenshotted it, shared it, quoted it, commented under it. Within hours, it became the most liked reply he had ever posted online. Musicians reposted it as if it were a universal truth. Deaf creators thanked him for saying what so many had been trying to express for years. Parents of deaf children cried as they read it over and over again. Keanu didn't expect any of that. He just meant every word. As the hours passed, Keanu's simple reply continued to spread. It reached people who had never listened to Dogstar, who had never watched one of his movies, who had no interest in celebrity news. It resonated because it wasn't about fame or performance. It was about humanity. It was about redefining how people understood a community too often overlooked or misunderstood. Journalists shared the comment in articles that focused less on the viral clip itself and more on the message behind it. One writer noted Keanu Reeves didn't just give this boy a gift. He gave the world a new way to talk about connection. Music therapists added their thoughts, explaining how rhythm and frequency create emotional pathways even without sound. Deaf creators expressed gratitude that someone with such influence spoke with understanding rather than pity. But among all the reactions, the comment's original author, the mother who had written the now famous line, posted again. She thanked Keanu for his response and shared a short video of her daughter feeling the beat of a drum through the floor of their living room. The girl smiled brightly, tapping her hand in sync with the rhythm only she could feel. Her mother wrote, "This is her experience. This is her joy, and it's just as real as any sound." That video added another layer to the conversation. People realized they weren't just witnessing a single moment in a single concert. They were witnessing expression in its purest form. They were witnessing a truth many had never considered. Music lives through more than ears. It lives through touch, through emotion, through connection. Keanu watched the girl's clip alone in his small rehearsal room. He felt a warmth spread across his chest as he watched her smile. He thought about the boy again, about how his hands trembled with joy when the bass vibrated against his palms. He understood now that what happened that night wasn't an isolated gesture. It was part of something bigger, something meaningful. By evening, news channels aired segments that highlighted the mother's words. ASL educators appeared on interviews explaining the importance of shifting perspectives. Music programs began discussing inclusive ways to teach rhythm to children with hearing differences. A school for the deaf reposted the clip and added, "This is why representation matters." And through it all, Keanu's quiet comment continued to rise, circulating not because of who he was, but because of what he said. Music is not just sound. It's vibration, emotion, and connection. People printed it on posters. Teachers taped it to classroom walls. Musicians wrote it in captions. Parents wrote it in journals. It became more than a comment. It became a bridge. And then something beautiful happened in the boy's city. The ripple that began online soon reached the boy's hometown. What started as a single video of a quiet moment backstage had grown into a global conversation about connection and the many ways people experience the world. And in the small city where the boy lived, people began to see the viral clip not as something distant, but as something that touched their own community. The first to reach out was a local music teacher named Mr. Harlan, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair who had been teaching guitar and percussion for nearly 20 years. He had seen the clip late at night after a long day of lessons. The moment the child placed his hands on Keanu's bass, he felt something stir inside him. He watched it twice, then 3 times. Then he sent a message to the boy's mother through a community forum asking if she would allow him to meet her son. She responded the next morning. By the end of that week, the boy stood in a small music classroom filled with drums, wooden boxes, bass guitars, and thick rugs. The walls were covered with posters of famous musicians, but the room felt warm and welcoming. The teacher knelt down, showing the boy a large wooden djembe drum. He didn't speak, knowing his words wouldn't matter. Instead, he placed both palms on the drum and struck it gently. The vibration traveled straight through the wood and into the boy's hands. The child's face lit up instantly. Mr. Harlan smiled and handed the drum to him. The boy tapped it lightly, then more firmly, then began experimenting with rhythm, the way children explore new languages. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just feeling music, he was creating it. Word spread quickly. Another teacher reached out, this one from a nearby community center that offered art and after-school programs. She had seen the viral clip and realized that her center had unused practice rooms with wooden floors perfect for vibration-based learning. She contacted the boy's mother asking if her son would like to try a tactile music class. When the mother asked how much it would cost, the teacher shook her head gently. It's free. It's for him, and for any child like him. Within 2 weeks, the community center created a new program, Tactile Rhythm Time. It began with just 2 children, the boy and another young student who had recently lost her hearing. They sat on the wooden floor together while an instructor played a bass guitar plugged into a floor amp. The children placed their hands flat against the boards, feeling the deep pulses travel into their arms and chests. They tapped the floor together, learning how vibration became pattern and how pattern became rhythm. More families heard about it. Soon, 3 children joined, then 5. The room began to fill with small hands on drums, palms on guitars, feet pressed against wooden stages. Instructors introduced different instruments, cajons, low-tom drums, bass strings, even tuned floorboards designed to carry specific frequencies. The boy became the happiest he had ever been. Every class brought new discovery, new laughter, new friends who understood his world. He no longer stood alone at fences. He now stood among a small group of children who experienced music the same way he did, and the movement kept growing. As the classes grew, the atmosphere inside the community center changed. What had once been a quiet building used mostly for after-school tutoring now pulsed with gentle vibrations several evenings a week. Parents lingered in hallways, smiling as they watched their children press their palms to drums or tap rhythms along wooden panels. The instructors adjusted their teaching style, focusing less on sound and more on feel. They encouraged the children to explore each instrument with curiosity, allowing them to discover what each vibration meant to them personally. The boy quickly became a favorite among the teachers, not because he was the loudest or the most confident, but because he threw himself into every activity with a kind of pure enthusiasm that reminded the adults why they had chosen to teach in the first place. He tapped rhythms on the floor with steady determination. He rested his cheek against a cajon to feel the resonance travel across his face. He learned to feel the difference between fast pulses and slow ones. He learned to recognize patterns through sensation alone. Soon, he wasn't alone in his excitement. The other children began to bond with him, forming friendships built on mutual understanding. They communicated through gesture expression and shared vibration, creating their own version of musical conversation. They gathered in small circles, taking turns pressing their hands on instruments while laughing silently with one another. One Saturday afternoon, the center hosted a small, open house to show parents what their children had learned. Instead of a typical recital, the instructors asked the children to perform by demonstrating tactile rhythm sequences. They stood in a semicircle on the wooden floor, hands ready. The lead instructor struck a deep note on the bass amp. The vibration rolled across the floor. The children responded in unison, tapping the pattern back with their palms. Their timing wasn't perfect, but their joy was unmistakable. The boy's mother watched from a folding chair with tears in her eyes. Her son wasn't standing on the outside looking in. He wasn't the child others didn't understand. He was a part of something, surrounded, included, happy. She placed a hand over her heart as he pressed his palms against the floor and tapped confidently, smiling wider than she had ever seen. The room erupted with warm applause, not loud, but full of emotion. Parents hugged each other. Teachers exchanged glances filled with pride. And the children looked around in delight, their faces glowing with accomplishment. After the event, one parent approached the boy's mother and said quietly, "Your son inspired all of this. We're grateful." She looked at her son, who was running his hands along a drum with gentle curiosity, and felt her breath catch. Everything had changed because of one moment at a concert, one vibration, one act of kindness. But the story wasn't complete until one final moment. Months passed, and the quiet movement that began with a single moment backstage had grown into something no one in the boys' city had expected. The tactile music classes became a small but thriving community, filled with children who experienced rhythm through touch rather than sound. Teachers created new exercises every week. Parents brought snacks and stayed to help. Volunteers showed up to support the instructors. And the boy who had once stood alone at a fence outside a concert became one of the most enthusiastic students in the program. He arrived early to every class. He touched every drum with reverence, every wooden panel with curiosity, every bass string with recognition. His smile grew brighter with each lesson. His confidence bloomed quietly, like a flower soaking up sunlight it never knew it needed. Even the other children gravitated toward him, sensing his gentle excitement, his eagerness to share every new rhythm he learned. He had become a leader without meaning to, simply by being joyful. One afternoon, the director of the community center approached the boy's mother with an idea. She explained that the center would be hosting its first open community showcase, a chance for families to gather, support the program, and celebrate the children's new abilities. She asked if the boy might participate. The mother's breath caught. The idea of her son performing in front of people felt overwhelming, extraordinary, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. But she saw the hope in his eyes as he traced his fingers along a bass guitar's strings, and she nodded with a trembling smile. The preparation began weeks in advance. Instructors set up a special tactile bass platform designed to carry vibration through the floor more powerfully than any amp. The boy practiced simple, rhythmic patterns, tapping out slow, steady pulses with the side of his hand. He learned to anticipate vibration instead of sound, to feel timing the way others listened for it. At first, his movements were hesitant, unsure. But with encouragement from teachers and laughter from friends, he grew steadier, more confident, more expressive. The day of the performance arrived on a cool Saturday afternoon. Families filled the multi-purpose room at the center. It wasn't a grand stage or a professional venue. It was a simple space with folding chairs, colored banners, hand-drawn by the children, and a wooden floor that carried vibration beautifully. The boy's mother sat near the front with her phone ready, nerves fluttering through her chest as she watched her son pace behind the curtain area, pressing his palms repeatedly against the base platform to reassure himself. The lights dimmed slightly, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to signal the beginning. The instructor stepped forward, welcomed the crowd, and explained how the tactile program worked. People listened attentively, many for the first time understanding how music could live through touch alone. Then the instructor gave the signal. It was time. The boy stepped forward. His movements were small at first, his shoulders tense, his eyes wide. He approached the tactile bass setup, a simple stand with the instrument anchored to a resonating board, and placed his hands gently against the wooden body of the bass. He waited. The instructor tapped a slow beat nearby, letting the vibration travel through the floor and into the board. The boy felt the pulse. He blinked. Then he tapped back. The first tap was soft, almost timid, but it echoed through the room in the way only vibration can. The children seated behind him on small drums and wooden boxes waited for his cue, their palms poised. The instructor tapped the floor once more, sending a gentle pulse traveling across the platform. The boy felt it roll into his hands, and this time he responded more clearly. He struck the baseboard with the side of his palm, steady and confident. The children responded in unison, tapping the rhythm back. A ripple of movement traveled across the room. The audience leaned forward instinctively, watching the exchange with growing excitement. The boy tapped again, setting a slightly faster pace. The children followed. Their hands moved together, creating a choreography of vibration that filled the floor with warmth. There was no melody in the air, but there was a melody in the feeling. The boy lifted his chin, sensing the room's energy. He tapped the sequence once more, pressing his palm firmly to the bass body to feel the resonant echo. His confidence grew with each moment he stayed connected to the vibration. He wasn't following anymore. He was leading. The mothers in the audience covered their mouths in awe. Fathers straightened in their seats, pride brightening their faces. Grandparents wiped their eyes without hesitation. The boy's mother recorded everything, with trembling hands, tears already slipping down her cheeks as she watched her son command the rhythm that rolled across the room. The children behind him struck their instruments with growing energy, forming a supportive chorus that amplified his every tap. The instructor watched with shining eyes, nodding encouragement from the side. The boy absorbed it all, not through sound, but through movement, through energy, through the subtle tremors of the room. Then he took a breath and tapped out a new pattern, slightly more complex, slightly more daring. The children followed again, perfectly in sync. A wave of warm applause filled the room, not loud enough to overwhelm, but soft, loving, supportive. The boy felt the vibration of the clapping through the floorboards. His eyes widened in surprise. He looked around, nervous for a moment, as if he had done something wrong. But when he saw the smiles surrounding him, something inside him loosened. He smiled, a big, bright, full-hearted smile that lit up his whole face. His mother let out a soft cry, overwhelmed by the sight. She lowered her phone and covered her mouth, letting the moment wash over her. Her son wasn't isolated. He wasn't misunderstood. He wasn't alone. He was performing. He was seen. As the rhythm slowed, the instructor lifted a hand to signal the end. The children tapped a final pulse together. The boy pressed both palms to the bass one more time, savoring the vibration, holding it close, like a memory he never wanted to lose. Then the applause rose again. And this time, he stood tall. The boy's world began to change in quiet, steady ways after his first public performance. Nothing dramatic at first, no overnight transformation, no sudden shift in personality. Instead, confidence bloomed inside him like a small flame that finally found air to breathe. Each day it grew a little brighter. His mother noticed it first in the way he walked. His steps had more certainty, more purpose. He no longer clung to her side when entering new places. He explored. He touched walls, floors, door frames, testing how each surface responded to vibration. Every new texture became part of his expanding language. At school, his teachers saw the difference. The boy began participating in activities he once avoided. During group projects, he approached other children with small gestures, inviting them into his world instead of waiting to be invited into theirs. When the class listened to music during art time, he placed his hands on the table or against the floor, feeling the faint echoes of the speakers. For the first time, he smiled in class, wide, unguarded, and filled with pride. His classmates noticed. Some grew curious, others asked questions. A few even mimicked him, pressing their palms against the floor to see if they could feel what he felt. He didn't mind. He enjoyed sharing. The community center expanded its tactile music program as more children joined. Instructors added new activities, introducing wooden resonator boards, low-frequency pads, and interactive rhythm stations that pulsed gently beneath the hands of every child who touched them. And the boy who once struggled to find a place where he belonged now became one of the most enthusiastic guides in the room. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His hands explained everything. When a new child hesitated to join an activity, he gently placed their hands on the drum next to his, tapping a slow rhythm they could follow. When someone struggled to understand timing, he positioned their palms side by side with his, showing them how vibration could act like a heartbeat. His patience made the other children feel comfortable. His joy made them feel welcome. Without meaning to, he became a teacher. His mother often watched from the back of the room, tears brimming in her eyes as she saw her son blossom. He had spent years fighting isolation, years feeling misunderstood, overlooked, or simply unseen. Now he stood at the center of a small world that understood him perfectly, where communication happened through touch, expression, movement, and shared rhythm. And through it all, the bass Keanu had given him became more than an instrument. It became a symbol, a doorway to a kind of expression he never knew was possible. He kept it in his room on a soft stand beside his bed. Every night before he went to sleep, he placed his hand on the wooden body of the bass, feeling the memory of vibrations that were no longer there, but still lived inside him. Sometimes he whispered a soft breath against it, imagining how music might feel if sound had shape. His mother often peeked through the doorway at night and saw him resting one hand gently on the instrument as he drifted off, comforted by its presence. The bass was no longer just a gift. It was a companion, a teacher, a bridge, and it became part of his identity in a way he carried proudly. As the months unfolded, the boy's connection to rhythm only deepened. What once felt like a fragile spark now glowed with confidence and purpose. The instructors at the community center began relying on him during classes, asking him to demonstrate simple vibration sequences or help guide new students through their first tactile exercises. He approached each task with quiet enthusiasm, showing a gentle leadership that made even the shyest children feel safe. More children joined the program every week. Parents brought sons and daughters who had never touched an instrument before, curious after seeing the viral clip and reading the stories that followed. Many of them had spent years searching for places where their kids felt understood. Here, they found a community built around shared experience rather than limitations. And at the heart of that community stood the boy who had unknowingly sparked it all. He developed a routine of arriving early, placing his hand on every drum, every floor panel, every resonator board. It was his way of greeting the room, of saying hello in the language he knew best. The instructors allowed him to lead warm-up exercises. He tapped slow patterns on the baseboard, and the children tapped them back. Sometimes he tapped a pattern too quickly or unevenly, and the room burst into shared laughter. Other times he tapped with perfect timing, and the children smiled with admiration. He was no longer just a participant. He was a mentor. The bass from Keanu became central to everything he did. The instructors handled it with care, bringing it out during special sessions. The boy treated it like something sacred. He placed his palm on it before every class, as if grounding himself in the memory of the night his world expanded. Sometimes he closed his eyes and gently pressed both hands against the wooden body, imagining the vibrations that once flowed through it. His mother often said that the bass seemed to speak to him even in silence. At school, his transformation became even more apparent. He joined an after-school rhythm group formed by one of his teachers after hearing about the community program. The group was small at first, but word spread, and soon a handful of kids gathered weekly to experiment with rhythm through clapping, tapping, and floor vibrations. The boy became the natural center of the group. He showed his classmates how to feel the tremor of a speaker through their desks, or how to tap their feet to follow a beat they couldn't hear. Some children discovered they loved rhythm more through touch than through sound. The boy's mother watched all of this with gratitude she struggled to contain. She often said that Keanu didn't just give her son a bass. He gave him confidence. He gave him community. He gave him a language. And that brings us to the ending. There are moments in life that do not make headlines at first. They do not shake the world with noise or spectacle. Instead, they settle quietly into the heart, leaving soft ripples that grow larger with time. What happened between Keanu and the little boy began as one of those moments. A simple gesture, a silent connection, a few vibrations shared in the middle of a concert where thousands of people were listening, yet only two truly heard each other. As the months passed and the world moved forward, the story continued living, not because of fame, cameras, or attention, but because of what the moment revealed about human connection. It reminded people that kindness is not always loud, compassion is not always grand. Sometimes it lives in small, unplanned decisions made without expectation. Keanu didn't set out that night to change a child's life. He didn't walk onto that stage with plans to give away his bass learn, a boy's world, or spark a community movement. He simply saw someone who needed to feel included. He noticed something others missed, and he acted. That is what made the moment unforgettable. Music is often described as a universal language, but this story showed the world something deeper. Music isn't universal because everyone can hear it. It is universal because everyone can feel it, whether through sound vibration, memory, or emotion. When the boy pressed his palms against the bass, he wasn't hearing notes. He was feeling a heartbeat, a pulse, a connection to another person that said, "You belong here too." And in that instant, Keanu wasn't just a musician or an actor on a stage. He was a bridge between two worlds, a world of sound and a world of vibration, proving that both are equally real, equally powerful, equally human. His gesture carried far beyond the concert. It reached classrooms, community centers, living rooms filled with children experiencing music through touch for the first time. It reached parents who had spent years searching for ways to help their children feel included. It reached teachers who suddenly understood how to adapt lessons. It reached people who never thought about deafness beyond the absence of sound. It changed them. It softened them. It opened their eyes. And for the boy, the impact was deeper still. His confidence grew. His friendships blossomed. His world expanded in ways even his mother couldn't have imagined. He found a language, through rhythm, through touch, through vibration, that allowed him to express joy he had kept inside for years. Every night when he rested his hand on the wooden body of the bass as he fell asleep, he carried with him the memory of the moment someone understood him without needing words. That is the lasting impact of kindness, the kind that doesn't seek praise, reward, or attention. The kind that grows quietly into something larger, something meaningful, something that changes more than one life. In a world often overwhelmed by noise and division, this story reminds us that connection is still possible, compassion is still powerful, and acts of goodness, no matter how small, can ripple outward in ways no one can predict. And as we look back on everything this moment created, everything it inspired, one truth stands clear. The heart doesn't need ears to feel music. The soul doesn't need sound to experience connection. And kindness, no matter how quiet, always leaves an echo. What happened in that small backstage corner grew into something larger than anyone expected because it was rooted in something simple, one human being choosing to see another. Not as a fan, not as a stranger, not as someone defined by limitation, but as a child full of potential emotion and unspoken dreams. That kind of recognition has a power greater than applause, brighter than stage lights, and more lasting than any performance. Keanu's humility is what carries the story forward. He didn't brag about the viral moment. He didn't comment on the headlines praising him. He didn't seek interviews or spotlights. Instead, he quietly focused on what mattered most, the boy's joy and the connection they shared. Long after the internet moved on to the next big moment, Keanu still thought about the child, the way his eyes lit up when the bass vibrated through his palms, and the way he hugged the instrument before leaving the venue that night. That memory, the pure wordless joy, stayed with him. The story reminds us that healing often begins in places we least expect. It begins when someone slows down long enough to notice someone else's world. It begins when we choose gentleness, even in the middle of chaos. And it begins when we treat people not according to what they lack, but according to what they feel. The boy didn't need ears to understand music. He didn't need sound to experience beauty. All he needed was a moment of genuine connection, someone willing to show him that the world still had space for him, that he could touch rhythm the way others listened to it, and that his way of experiencing life was not lesser. It was simply different, and different can be beautiful. In many ways, his journey is a reminder for everyone watching. We all carry different ways of feeling the world, some through sound, some through movement, some through silence, some through vibration. And each way is valid, each way is meaningful, each way deserves to be understood. As we step back and look at the whole story, from the boy standing alone at the fence to the moment he stood proudly on stage, months later, we see a path shaped by kindness. We see a ripple that started small and grew into a wave touching an entire community. We see how one quiet action can inspire hundreds of others. And we see how compassion, when offered freely, becomes a language that needs no translation. So let this story be a reminder to look a little closer, to pause a little longer, to notice the people standing quietly at life's edges, hoping for someone to understand their rhythm. Because the smallest act of kindness can echo far beyond the moment it is given. And now to you, the one listening to this story. 2 questions to carry with you. Have you ever seen a moment of kindness that restored your faith in humanity? What story would you like to see next about Keanu Reeves?